Welcome back. You're watching DayBreak on this 3rd day of November 2025. In studio I have Ivan Sugada, who's an advocate of the High Court. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Great. Senator Sylvia Kasanga. I'll never stop calling you Senator, so just allow me to call you that.
You're allowed, Sam.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sam. Thank you for having me here today.
Great having you. Yeah. Where have you been?
It's been a while. We've been busy, like every other Kenyan.
Yes.
Yeah, making a living.
Yes.
Yeah, making a change here and there where you can.
Right.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
Good to see you. She's the president of the Architects Alliance. Then we have Franklin Mukwanja, Executive Director, Center for Multi-Party Democracy. How are you doing?
Good morning, Sam. I'm very fine.
Good to see you. How are you doing democratically?
It's work in progress.
Work in progress.
It's build up.
Yeah.
It's breakthroughs. It's about discipline of people, discipline of action, discipline of thought.
Yeah. All right. And you're still waiting for the arrival of Sheila Olang, who is a development economist. As soon as she's here, she'll be joining the conversation. Now, this morning, we're waking up to what you find at the front page of the Daily Nation as Oburu Oginga saying it's DP or nothing. ODM interim leader Oburu Oginga has drawn a bold red line in Kenya's post-Raila Odinga politics, declaring that the party will not settle for anything less than the deputy president seat in 2027. If that is the case, what would happen to the current deputy president, Professor Kithure Kindiki, under the UDA party? That's a food for thought. On the front page of the Standard, you'll find Tanzania massacre. And they are saying that if Mwalimu Julius Nyerere were to return to the nation he built on the ideals of African unity, he would be horrified. As Tanzania's first female president fought to secure her own mandate, blood flowed across the land. Cut off from the world during and after polling, Tanzanians endured what rights groups now describe as a bloodbath that was hidden behind an official blackout, but laid bare through reports shared with their Kenyan counterparts. And that's why I want us to begin by talking about the situation in Tanzania. I don't know if, Franklin, you want to go first because you come from the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, which is in Kenya, but I'm sure you have some alliances outside of the country. What are your thoughts with the developments in Tanzania?
Yeah, good morning and thank you for having me. I mean, it's correct that we work with Kenyans, but we have alliances across the region. And globally, Tanzania Center for Democracy is our partner, and we consult and we work together quite well. It's unfortunate what's happening in Tanzania, but it's not new. If you look at the deal that was procured to bring Tanganyika and Zanzibar together, and look at the developments along the way, the things that are happening on the mainland today, are things that we witnessed possibly in Zanzibar in 2000, 2001. You know, those who took note knew that while there was a desire for stability, Tanzanians also yearned for freedom. And that has not evolved pretty well. It's unfortunate that Samia Suluhu, the president-elect, has not even been clever enough, in my view, to hide her iron fist under the velvet gloves. She's been too brazen, too predictable in her actions. And even in the post-election statements of now tongue-in-cheek asking for the others who share the same vision and values to join her, I think it's really adding insult to injury, and that's not something that we should be celebrating about. What is rather unfortunate is that we are missing statesmen, we are missing leaders. If you look at the statement from the Africa Union, it tells you that there's a big problem. If you look at the response from the other observers, including SADC and the others, it tells you that we have a collusion of the willing that are disregarding the basic and fundamental freedoms and rights. And unless we have peer mechanisms to review each other and positively critique each other, then we can see that democracy is really backsliding, and we must be very careful. Elections are coming up in Uganda in January. We can also see that the opposition leader is, one of the most experienced leaders and the main competitor for many years of Yoweri Museveni is actually incarcerated behind bars. The opposition is not given the due regard and space to do their politics. Right. We can see the language that is obtaining in Kenya as well, where people want to only package themselves as the biggest dog, the biggest dog syndrome, that you want to surround yourself with minnows and be the biggest dog in the kennel. These are symptoms that are very clear that we also as a country must be careful and headed in a direction that could be dangerous. But what's happening in Tanzania, it's unfortunate, right. But it's not new. It's something that has been simmering. I think that Nyerere is well credited, but he had his own inherent challenges that he did not resolve. Right. I do not think the coming together of Zanzibar and Tanganyika was a union that was democratically done, right. In a way that would guarantee both stability and the freedoms. Early 2000s, the challenges were in the island. Right. We are seeing that now coming to the mainland.
Okay. And karibu sana, Sheila Olang.
Asante sana.
It's good to have you. We're talking about the Tanzanian elections. I'll come to you, Senator Kasanga. But first, Evans, yes. I'm looking at a statement that was sent from Tanzania by the Minister for Foreign Affairs and East African Cooperation, Mahmoud Thabit Kombo. And he first went ahead to say that with a view to enhance transparency in the electoral process, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, invited local, regional, and international observers to observe the general election in line with national laws, regional and international standards. In this regard, national, regional, and international observers, including the EAC, ICGLR, SADC, AU, EU, as well as Diplomatic Watch, participated in this year's election. And of course, congratulating Mama Samia Suluhu for her 97.2% win of those elections. I think the number was 31.5 million votes. How are you taking that?
Well, I will expect nothing less from the foreign minister. He is an appointee of the president, and of course, typical African politician, you have to be the poodle, you have to be the usual lucky, kiss the feet of the person who feeds you. That is normal with these African politicians. I chair the East African Law Society Rule of Law Committee. My president, Rama Abubakar, issued a statement yesterday on behalf of the ELS Council, whereby the East African Law Society condemned what is happening in Tanzania. I wish to reiterate the position of the ELS president and the ELS as a body. We have information of various atrocities, people who have been killed, people who have been maimed. I happen to have watched some videos and saw some photos yesterday. It's a call to really reflect and ask, is it worth it for you to come into office and to claim to lead when people have been killed? We have distress calls coming out of Tanzania where people cannot get food. People are unable to go to hospital. We have a couple of Tanzanians who have been brought to border towns in Kenya just to receive treatment. The problems in Tanzania are myriad, and this was coming.
Yep.
We have an inchoate constitutional review process that the governing CCM has not been keen to see through. That has been a problem. Tanzania is still operating under the constitution that was ushered in the 60s. Another fundamental problem with what we saw yesterday, the election results as announced cannot be challenged in court.
Right.
It's fait accompli. And another atrocity that comes out with what was declared, this is now officially the world record. I think the most preposterous of announced results was a 90% from one country in Eurasia, where they were watching TV And there are projections before the election that the president was going to win by 90%. And even before the polling had closed in that country, the Electoral Commission in that country was projecting the 90% score, and that stood as the record. Tanzania now comes and takes it at 90%, 98%. Yep. It's an atrocity. It doesn't make sense. I mean, we have to get serious. Yes.
Right, and of course, as we continue to absorb the reality, it is the statement for me. And I know you're saying that the minister has no choice but to write what he wrote. So they continue to say the integrity of this year's election is attributed to the reforms identified and implemented by all stakeholders, including political parties and civil society organizations. Among the notable reforms include the establishment of the Independent Electoral Commissions, INEC, I don't know why it's commissions, and review of existing election legal frameworks. Also says that in the most unfortunate event at the end of the voting process, isolated incidents of breaching of law and order occurred in some parts of the country. And in maintaining order, our security agencies acted swiftly, professionally, and decisively to address these situations, ensuring that the isolated incidents did not escalate and disrupt the broader electoral process. Senator Kasanga, what are your thoughts? Because we've had our history in Kenya about mismanaged elections and how events unfolded. Your thoughts about Tanzania and how they've conducted themselves?
Yeah, thank you again, Sam, for having me here today. And indeed, those headlines are heartbreaking. You know, seeing Tanzania as it is today is completely heartbreaking. But what comes to my mind are three critical things. First, legitimacy and trust. We cannot speak about anything public, office, presidency, or any other, without carrying the trust of the people. If the trust of the people is missing, there's no legitimacy, whichever way you look at it. Now, while the internet was still up in Tanzania, we did see the unfolding events towards the election. And you could see the buildup of, you know, the citizens getting very uncomfortable, especially because a majority of them, their leader was in jail. The opposition leader was in jail, never given a chance. And it is these issues that now create the lack of legitimacy. The Electoral Commission itself, the cutting down of internet, you know, removing any means of communication by the people on the day of election itself, you know. How then do you expect the people to accept such an outcome, whichever way? So there's a question of legitimacy and trust. There's a question of trustworthy institutions. And I think we can say, iwe funzo hata kwetu sisi, because we are also preparing ourselves to go for an election. As the other speakers have said, Uganda is also coming up. We are watching to see, you know, are we building institutions that are trustworthy to Kenyans, that are going to be strong enough to showcase that we can trust the process, because it's from the process that there's legitimacy then that is created towards the leadership. Another thing that comes out in Tanzania that I think a lot of Africa has to be wary about is the clear gap between the young and the old, the establishments that are there, and the young population that is obvious. The mean age in Africa today is 19. And there seems to be a clear disconnect with a lot of governance leaders across Africa not realizing that the youthful population is here and this is their time. Yep. And if we are not understanding them and giving them their space, then obviously we run into the same problems of lack of trust. You're not listening to us. You're not understanding us. We don't want you as leaders. So we don't want anything to do with this. And they're restless. They are unhappy, you know, for all sorts of reasons. Lack of jobs, you know, you can name it. The youthful population is so restless, and yet we have governance, leaders in governance and in administration who do not recognize this huge challenge that Africa has. The third thing that I can see here that pains me, and after reading, of course, the headline today on the Standard about Julius Nyerere, is the lack of Pan-Africanism that the leader of Tanzania has just demonstrated. I didn't want to go into the fact that she's a woman, and of course we celebrate women breaking glass ceilings and reaching to the highest level. Of course we celebrated when Mama Suluhu reached there as, you know, as an African leader and a woman. I mean, these are not easy places for women to reach. It's always a challenge for women in politics. But now her tenure has been tainted in a way that it is easy to say, ruined it for women. so to speak, but also for Pan-Africanism. Are we, respecting our elders of Pan-Africanism when we behave in this manner of lack of democracy, lack of, appreciating the Bill of Rights and human rights and fighting for freedom and fighting for all these rights? This is such a clawback to Pan-Africanism. And I don't know, Sam, if I've ever mentioned to you, but I'm a Pan-Africanist myself in my own right, and we do have the Pan-African Institute in Lukenya University, where this year, in fact, we are celebrating governance and Pan-Africanism. And I'm sure this will also feature on the 9th of November, where we are having our second celebrations of Pan-Africanism. And we have the former president of Botswana, His Excellency Ian Kama-Seretse, will be coming to deliver a keynote speech. And I'm sure this Tanzania situation here will feature, because it is such a serious clawback to Pan-Africanism. And we speak of Africa rising.
Right.
I've spoken in so many platforms in Europe. You go there, Kenyans are doing very well there, but everyone is looking to Africa for the future, be it business, be it, it's the new frontier. It's where the young population is. If we cannot get leaders and presidents who appreciate the scenario that we have and are clawing back on, the gains that our former leaders have made, then we do have a serious problem. So it's with a lot of sadness, actually.
All right. And obviously, there are those that have been asking questions why the chairperson of the East African community is so quiet. That is President William Ruto. There's also the respect that presidents would have for each other, and also for countries to deal with their own internal matters. But perhaps it's time that we hear any comments from the Kenyan leadership. But at the same time, Sheila, when you look at the history of Tanzania, there appears to have been more insistence, and actually I think the founders of that nation thought development, progress, what is that? Economic development is more important than democracy. There has been the Ujamaa spirit, but then here we are in 2025, where countries are more global than they were previously. What journey must they make, knowing that here they are? Like Wakili says here, you cannot challenge a presidential election outcome in any court of law as long as INEC has made that declaration. That sounds laughable if you had to reflect on what we have in Kenya. What must they do? Because, yes, progress is important, but also democratic expansion is crucial.
Thanks, Sam. I think the age-old question is always about what works when. And I think that's where a lot of our leaders get it wrong. There was a time and a space where economic development was prioritized over democracy. There was a time and there was a space for that. If you look at places like China, look at the history of China and how there's a period where during Mao's time where his only focus was to say, forget democracy, we're going to build China, we're going to take China back into becoming something formidable. But once then China moved on and got to become the China that we know today, the question is now, have they been able to balance that out with democracy, for example? Then you come to other regions or other countries, Tanzania being one of them, Kenya, I think we're not that much exempt. And we ask ourselves, is there a time and a space where we can ignore democracy and say we're focusing on the economy? My response to that is absolutely not. In the world we're living in today, there's nothing. I'm an economist, and I'm happy to tell you that there's nothing as pure economics. Today, even as an economist, we have to grapple with something called political economy, because they're so intertwined that separating one from the other is becoming more and more impossible, because the one keeps affecting the other. We live in a world where we have become so ingrained or intertwined together. So we have something called a global economy that no matter what you do, even in your own state, when somebody's sneezing in Tanzania, Kenya today will be affected. We saw that there's trucks and trucks of goods that are now stuck at the border that cannot cross either from Tanzania into Kenya or vice versa. And this is just to show you how much more integrated we are. Then the question then becomes, if you have leadership that is saying, forget democracy, let us focus on the economy, does that work today? And the answer is no. You have to find a way of finding absolute balance. Because at the end of the day, like we're saying, you have people who are in the diaspora who are sending back remittances. You have goods and services moving in a speed that we have never seen before. And most importantly, Sam, we have the spillover effect. Today, whatever is happening in Kenya, whether you like it or not, when Kenya is busy having a small cough, you see Tanzania's fever will start picking up. That is exactly what you're seeing here. You know, and for many, I remember last year, Sam, when we were demonstrating here in Kenya, we kept telling everybody, don't think we are Uganda, we are not Tanzania. That's what we kept saying as Kenyans. And I remember there's a member of parliament in Tanzania who's on the record saying, Kenyans, there's nothing you can teach us. You're busy burning your parliament and burning your streets, and we don't behave like that. Well, look at you now. I don't know what her name is, but I would like to remind her, look at you now. You see, the thing is, there's a great leadership, I think, anthropologist, Margaret Mead, who said it only takes a small, don't underestimate when a small group of people come together with an idea and then it flourishes. Well, for Africa, it's not a small group of people. It is most of the population, which is youth, right? Kenya, for example, you have 75% of the population today that is under the age of 35. Some, we are the majority. So if there's a power of a small group of people to change things, imagine that now we are the majority and we believe that things have to work differently. I think leadership boils down to opportunity. Why are you in leadership? You're in leadership because you have to be able to transform the lives of others. You look at what is going on in Tanzania, and I agree with my panelists here. Where is the legitimacy of all of this? You shut down the internet, then you come up, then now you're pronounced as the president, and there's no, you can't appeal. I mean, Kenyans, we always think we're bad until we look at the neighbor and you're like, well, at least we can go to we can go to the Supreme Court, and sometimes we get a nullification, sometimes it's hot air, but at least we have a place where we can go and we can complain about what is going. So first of all, I'm very grateful to the people who gave us a brand new constitution. Bravo, because I don't know where we would be if we were in such a case. But Tanzania is showing us that even in a population that we would have never expected this from Tanzania, absolutely never expected this from Tanzania. Right. And I can also speak to the brotherhood in East Africa. I'm so proud of us, Sam. I'm proud of the fact that when Tanzania shut down the internet, us in Kenya, we were busy receiving these videos and putting the word out so their voices could still be heard. There's a spillover effect. And Tanzania is going through it now. Someone called this is the quarterfinals. Semis are coming in January in Uganda. Finals are coming in 2027 in Kenya. Everybody take note.
So it's joint hosting.
We are enforcing democracy. We are enforcing democracy in East Africa now.
Okay. Are we hosting AFCON in 2027?
We are hosting AFCON. At the same time, we're hosting democracy. So Kenya, please lead the way in showing how elections are conducted free and fair and how democracy is implemented.
You know what's fascinating is that during the election period, that is, the election was on 29th, yes, 29th, 30th, 31st or thereabout. There was no communication coming from the government officials in Tanzania, but you heard from the general in charge of the People's Defense Force in Tanzania. As soon as an outcome was ready, we now hear them speaking, including the Foreign Affairs Minister, who is telling us that the government of the United Republic of Tanzania urges all international media to seek clarity and confirmation from the relevant authorities, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and East African Cooperation, before publishing any information related to the country, including information about the general elections. The United Republic of Tanzania remains committed to ensuring that law and order are maintained throughout the country while adhering to the democratic principles and the rule of law. Where does that happen? I mean, even if you want to maintain law and order, you also do that with the international media?
Well, you should not be surprised. For the viewers, there's a book by Professor Nick Cheeseman and class. They write about how to rig elections. This is the template that these despots, these teen gods in East Africa and all over Africa employ. So you will hear the official line from government usually being law and order, securing the peace. And then the access to information will be restricted, and usually through the Ministry or Department of Communication. Internet shutdown, because the internet has become a formidable tool for communication and dissemination of information. And that's why I always also urge Kenyans that we should not rest on our laurels. We have gallant attempts at clamping down and stifling the internet.
Yep.
So it's a pattern that you can see all over, and the communication restricted, release of information channeled through one source that is highly suspicious. And even with Tanzania, I am privy to information that credible observer missions were not in the country. There are some, I have been an observer before, there are some that were supposed to be on the ground. They found it so difficult that they didn't even get to the country. The pre-mission was very difficult. So when I hear somebody say that observers watch, I would encourage people to see what EHON released. My friend Mule was part of EHON, and they released some preliminary report yesterday. It's an indictment to what was organized to be an election. So it's a call for East Africa, Tanzania, to adhere to the principal provisions at Article 6 and 7 of the EAC Treaty, amongst which is democracy and human rights. EAC has been a club of brothers and their one sister now who's adopted their habits, hook, line, and sinker. It's bad manners for you to think that you will beat people and you will govern on them, wapende wasipende. That is not going to happen, and we can see the wave all over Africa. We had Madagascar, Cameroon that has been pacified since 1982, where we have a set of 90-year-olds, 90-year-old Chief Justice, 90-year-old President, 90-year-old everybody, beating down on people and thinking that you will do whatever you want with them. The youth in Africa are saying, no, democracy has to be meaningful to us, and democracy has to have meaning.
Evans, you don't like life expectancy, do you?
Well, I have no problem with life expectancy. What I don't have is this thinking that I can be president for life and I can do whatever I want because of age somehow gives me some potency. Yeah, I am all superior always because I'm aged. Eh?
Okay.
No. Yeah.
So I want us to close, but as we do that, in 2020, John Pombe Magufuli won the election with 12.5 million votes in an election that Tundu Lissu of Chadema got 1.9 million votes. 2025, which is just about 5 years later, Tundu Lissu is in prison for treason charges, not taking part in the election. Chadema is barred from participating. Samia Suluhu Hassan secures 31.5 million votes. That's about 19 million votes more. So that's how it works, right?
Let's be clear, Sam, that one, there was no election in Tanzania. It was a ritual, but nothing close to elections. There is no social contract, the moral and political legitimacy to govern the people of Tanzania, given willingly to Chama cha Mapinduzi led by Mama Samia Suluhu. So we have to be clear in that regard in terms of Tanzania. But let's look at it from the positive side. I think what Mama Samia Suluhu has done is actually the right thing to get Tanzania to begin solving the actual problems that they have been keen to cover up for many years. As I mentioned in my opening statement, is that if you look at the way the union was pieced together, the way I think Sabut Jumbe way back in 80s, the way it was clamped down by the Nyerere regime. Come to 2001, the Pemba challenges, and the Unguja Island challenges, where the Civic Union Front challenging the outcomes. And then the emergence of Chadema and the challenges on the mainland. That tells you that there's been issues. But I think Samia has just put the icing on the cake, has just made sure that young people are more determined more than ever. I do not think that she's going to sustain the momentum for clampdown. The case against Tundu Lissu is collapsing. At some point, the system will have to get him out. At some point, the conversations, and you can already see that she also already cracking under pressure and beginning to speak the language of, you know, if we're like-minded, come, let's talk about this. And therefore, there are good signs. So there is, in this dark moment that our brothers across the border are suffering, I reckon that Tanzania is actually looking now in the right direction. You know, there is no evolution. There is no evolution that, you know, even hatching of the poultry hatching, it takes the chicks to crash through, you know, themselves. Yep. The mother hen will warm the eggs, and I think she has done so. But it's, you know, the chicks are now hatching, and it's going to be very difficult for her, and the conversation have to happen. So there's a blessing in disguise in this, and we must be clear that the failed election and the result of it is that it's energized Tanzanians to a level that we're actually going to see, you know, the final steps towards a more democratic society. Okay. You mentioned about the chairman of this African community, and the challenge that we have in African leadership is that the concept of the window and the mirror. The normal things in good leadership is that a leader looks through the window to apportion credit to factors outside of them for the good things, and looks in the mirror to apportion responsibility for things that have gone poorly. Yeah. But in Africa, we have a tendency of blaming bad luck, and this bad luck includes our opponents, you know, and that is the situation. And I am not surprised that first there is acute silence. I do not think that the nature and the nurture of President William Ruto as chair of East Africa Community is going to issue any better statement looking into the democratic ideals, values, and principles. I would be surprised. And actually, I'm waiting to be surprised. But I am not very hopeful that I can wait for that surprise. It's going to be the age-long script of, you know, maintain peace and calm, transition, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Because his turn is coming, and he would want, you know, Samia not to look at the window, but look at the mirror and return a favor.
Interesting. So as we break from this conversation, so the East African community has 8 member states. I want to name them as you think about how democratic they are. We have Burundi. We have DRC. In DRC, the last election, the president won by 70%. We have Rwanda. The last election, the president there won by 99% of the vote. In Somalia, the election was narrowed to the members of parliament, securing 214 versus 110 for the current president. Do you want to think about South Sudan? Let's not. Then Uganda, obviously, you know what has been happening. They have a president since 1986 who is seeking re-election in January, or is it February? 2026. Yeah, so that's the East African community. We're taking a short break. When I come back, we talk about Kenyan matters, ile ambayo tunaelewa. Stay tuned.